Hello and welcome to The Winning Mentality with me, Charlie Bosco. Chatting to me today is gym owner Jay Collins, who quit his job in his early 40s despite having kids and a mortgage to pay for, and he started his own gym. Now, aged 51, he has 300 people who come and train regularly with him, and Max Edge, his gym, was recently awarded Best Independently Owned Fitness Centre in New Hampshire. During his journey to where he is now, he trained and got fully certified at Gym Jones, that most mythical of gyms, and has also turned his own gym into a community. Jay and I chatted about how he gets people working for and not against each other in the gym, and what keeps him enthused and excited. One particularly amusing highlight is when he talks about his two experiences of doing 1,000 burpee pull-ups. For the uninitiated, that means dropping onto your chest, getting back up, and immediately jumping onto a pull-up bar and doing a pull-up 1,000 times. And while that is unthinkable to, everyone, there's plenty in here that's applicable to all of us, including the story of Jay backing himself to succeed when he first opened the gym.
Well, the gym came about, I guess this is the best way to kind of tell the story, when I didn't always do this for a living. I'd say like in the 2006-ish range, I started personally changing the way I trained. CrossFit wasn't really well known back then. It was if you talk to a regular person on the street, they really had never heard of it. The internet wasn't even what it is right now. And most people, back then, if they had a computer, they might have had one computer in the home, but no, being able to access everything on your phone. So I ran across a friend of mine that I actually went to. It was a childhood friend. Told me about this training that he was doing with kettlebells and body weight movement, and I was traditionally I guess like what you call like a meathead, the type of guy that would go to the gym and do that, the long and short of it. That was pretty much it. And I went and worked out with this guy. He had a little, it was less than 1,000 square feet, his gym. And it was on the fourth floor of an old mill building in Nashua, New Hampshire. And he had just a handful of members, and it was a wood floor. There was no mats. And we went through I never even saw a kettlebell before. We went through some kettlebell movements and put together some body weight exercises. And the next thing you know, I couldn't walk for 5 days. And and immediately I was hooked. I've never used an Airdyne bike before. That was the first time I used and experienced, what it was like to be so cardiovascularly challenged that, I wasn't right for hours after. And again, immediately it just drew me to it. So from that point, it became, a passion and something that I pursued. So other guys my age might go, they might go on golf trips or trips to Vegas or whatever, and I'd go train with somebody. That's kind of like it became my passion, my hobby.
But what was your athletic background?
I did, I grew up, playing, I guess you'd call it the big three sports here in the States, football, basketball, and baseball. And I always did something each season as a child, and when I was in high school, and athletics was always something I was interested in. I did wind up coaching at the high school and college level for about a 10-year period in my early 20s, early 30s for football, American football, and it was strictly a part-time thing, and I did it with the other job that I was doing at the time. So I've always been active, and, I always liked working with people. And when, I guess, to kind of come full circle here, when I ran across that friend of mine that took me through this workout, I started training there, and I was talking to the people that I work with about what I was doing. And again, nobody even heard of anything like this before. And they said, "Hey, can you put together a workout here for us?" So what wound up happening was, I started training people that I work with. And about a month into doing it, I'm like, wait a second, I think I'm onto something. I was like, I think because all of a sudden it turned into like I was training five guys, and at the time it was almost unheard of that like women would want to do this type of training. And within the next month, I had like virtually every woman that worked at the company were doing lunchtime workouts with me as well. And I'd have about 30 people. I had to break it up because I had so little room. It was just like a one bay garage. I had about 30 people that I was training every day as free, and I did that for a couple of years. But that was really the start of the idea that maybe I could do this for a living.
It's a big leap, though, isn't it? It's a
Hugely,
big leap of faith.
yeah, and particularly at the time, I was in my early 40s. I'm 51 now, so I had, my wife and I. It's a second marriage for both of us, and she had four kids. I had three kids. We brought them all together, and I've had kids in college for the last 10 years, and we had kids, in private high school. We had and all these different plans happening. So it was financially, it was a huge leap. It was something that that ordinarily I don't know if I ever would have had the courage to do.
Why did you have the courage? Because I mean, you're turning down a regular job, presumably. What were you doing before?
I was a mortgage broker. So
Right.
that's what I did. That's what I did before I did this. And at the time, I made a good living, and we were comfortable. But honestly, I didn't like what I did. I kind of hated it, and it became something that I almost just couldn't not do, and I couldn't do it half-assed. Okay, to forgive the term, but like if I was going to do it, I had to go all in. And my wife and we used to go away. I say that again. We used to go away every year. Since we opened the gym, we don't go away quite as much anymore. But we were on a vacation in St. John in the Virgin Islands, and this is the idea of doing this had been on my mind for a long time. And I've talked lightly about it. Wouldn't it be kind of neat if I did this, or wouldn't it be cool if we did that? Like it never further than that. On this vacation, though, I had it in my mind that I was going to tell her exactly like what I wanted to do, and that like I had to do this. And if she didn't at that moment there, she could have completely said, "Are you crazy? How can we afford this?" And I think she just saw that it was something that was so important to me, and thankfully she believed in me enough, and she said, "Yeah, let's go for it."
But was there anything that initiated that tip? Because everybody knows people who talk about changing their life.
Yeah.
Everyone's guilty of it. We all say, "Oh, I'll do this, I'll do that," but actually, the day when you handed in your notice and walked away.
It wasn't out of like, oh my God, I got to get out of this because I got to find something else. It was, I need to do this because otherwise I don't know if I can actually be happy unless I find out if I can actually make this go. And I think my wife sensed that sense of, passion, urgency, whatever it is. And 9 months later, after we got back from St. John, was our first class here at Max Edge.
I mean, what was it like when you found the location and you think, well, this is it. This is the gym.
Yeah, it's funny. When I was going through that process, and I knew that, and ultimately, the gym that we opened up is actually right across the street from where I used to work, believe it or not. And it's kind of a funny story how we got here. Originally, I found a location in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is it's only about like 15 minutes away from here. But in New Hampshire and in this area, it might as well be an hour away. You know what I mean? You're in a whole different market.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the way it works. And I had everything all set. We had a deal in place. I had designs done, and it was one of these locations that was, honestly, it was. I wanted it. I wanted the idea of Max Edge to happen so badly. It was not probably the ideal location. Okay. But I was like in my head, I kept saying, yeah, but I can make this work, or yeah, I can make that work. And it was that type of thing where I just wanted it so badly. I was almost willing to like forego what maybe my original vision was. So for whatever reason, thankfully, the owner of the property was in Asia, and he owns a bunch of different companies. And this was one of his smaller investments. And I called him and he's like, oh, yeah, Jay, I'll be back next week and we'll do the lease then. And I'm like, okay, hey, I'm waiting. I'm ready to go. That same afternoon, I get a call from somebody who said, hey, I hear you're looking for a space. And I go, yes, I appreciate it, but I'm all set. I'm just waiting for this lease. And he goes, well, it's right across the street from Blue Water Mortgage, which was the company I was working at. And just go over and take a look at it. And I'm like, I hesitantly, I almost didn't look at it. I'm like, okay, I'll go take a quick look. It's what the heck? It's right across the street. As soon as I walked in, I'm like, all right, this is it. This is exactly this is exactly what I need. And what I felt like I needed was something that I wouldn't outgrow, something that that I didn't want to be one of these gyms that had a transition space every 2 or 3 years because they outgrew it. If I was going to go in this, I was going to really go in it and be in a place that I felt like maybe it was too much in the beginning, but I felt like over time we could fill it. And thankfully we did. So because that guy never got the lease to me in time, I mean, honestly, the lease should have been signed a couple of weeks earlier, but he just never got me the paperwork. I had to call him that afternoon and say, yeah, forget it. I'm out. We're going with something else. And thankfully we did.
What was your vision for the gym? I don't mean in terms of numbers and figures and memberships, but there are gyms everywhere. Why is your gym different?
Well, space-wise, it probably isn't that different from a lot of gyms anymore because, we're going on our 8th year and there just weren't that many of us around back then. In the last 8 years, this box type gym has popped up everywhere. And I still, in our area, in this market, I believe we're the best facility still. I think what's different about us, originally, basically what built us, yes, it was the workouts. It was the facility. People came in, they liked what they saw. It was different. It was something that caught people's attention. The idea of it was intriguing, all of that. The workouts are what kept people originally and the challenge that was within those workouts. But ultimately, I believe what really brought us to where we are today is the community aspect. Without that, we aren't what we are today, period. I don't care how good I think I am at my job or how incredible my workouts are. If it wasn't for that part of it, people coming together and developing relationships. And, we have, I can't tell you how many husbands, wives, partners, now people that never knew each other before are best friends now 7 years later. You know what I mean? Like literally best friends. This is a community.
But how did you go about creating that?
It's almost like, in the beginning, I had to put everything into this. It was 100-hour work week plus every single week. When I taught every class, like in Fool, when we first opened up, we had 11 classes a day. I taught.
And you taught them all?
All of them. All of them. I taught 11 classes a day. We had 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 a.m., noontime, 1 o'clock, 4, 5, 6, 7 at night. And I lived an hour away. So every morning I got up at 2:45, drove to the gym, would train before I taught my first class, because what I found was in the middle of the day, I was just too fatigued. I couldn't do it. I was too tired. I was literally falling asleep on my feet. So if I was going to get my training in, I had to do it before the 6 a.m. class. And after I taught the 7 p.m. class, I would get home at about like 9:15 at night, and I would literally walk by everybody, tell them I love them, and I'd go right to bed. And that's how it went for the first 6 months until I thankfully got rid of the 7 p.m. class. So that part of it, okay, I was here all the time. My wife was trying to manage being here, helping running the business side of it, because I couldn't do that. and she, all the billing and paying of the bills and receiving the money and whatnot. But she kids still raised at home still, and we're an hour away. So I think people saw how much we were putting into this of ourselves.
Yeah, do you think people respond to you having a lot of skin in the game?
Oh, 100%. Because if you don't, you're not, honestly, if you don't, you're just not going to care enough. You just won't. Like, there's just something about when your feet are to the fire and everything that you have, everything that you are is part of what you're trying to build. People will respond to that. And, I ask people to please, bring your friends in, do this, do that, help us in any way you can. If you like this and you want us to be here. In the beginning, it was weird. It was all of a sudden some of these classes would get a little bit big, and people would come tell me, they're like, I really don't want to tell my friends because I want them. I don't want this to get so big that it changes. I was like, well, trust me. Well, have faith. It's going to change. It needs to change in order for us to actually make this work. So thankfully people did bring people in, but it was funny. Some people, like, in their own minds, this was their thing and they wanted to share it, but at the same time too, they didn't want it to become something that it.
Do you still think that the personal side of it is big for you? When people walk in, you presumably know everyone's name. You've got a word for everyone. Do you still think that's a big part of why people keep coming back?
It's huge. We have, over 300 people here, and I know every single person's name. So does my son. The only, still to this day, all right, and people think we're nuts, all right, but to this day, it's myself and my son that teach 99% of the classes. I do all the programming. He is starting to do, he's starting to do some of the programming a couple of days a week, which has been great. It's given us a different dynamic and a different kind of vision. And we have a couple of people that will fill in when we need them, when we go away. But for the most part, it's us. So it's still us. It's not like I'm a businessman who's removed from the day to day. We know everybody. I mean, we know everybody.
And what is the training? If I was to find myself in New Hampshire
Mm-hmm.
and I come in for a session, what am I going to do? What do people do in your gym day to day?
Well, I think what kind of sets us apart is, well, first of all, I rarely do any workouts for time. We don't focus on the individual achievement as much as we do like a group dynamic, partner workouts. And I think that's one of the things we've been more specialized in, and one of the things that's evolved really out of necessity because of the size of the classes. But what's wound up happening is it's created these connections within the community. Because when if you have 45 people that show up at your 6 a.m. class, and you have a workout that's based off of, I don't know, to say off of, doing some back squats. Well, we only have 4 squat racks. Okay. I need to have people that can work a station like that, with each other effectively. Okay. For a certain time period. Well, maybe 2 or 3 other groups are doing something else for a certain period of time. So you will, if you come in here, you're going to do a lot of workouts where, each day during the week has a focus, be it, some type of, explosiveness, strength and power, some type of, it might be a heavy deadlift day. It might be a day that's nothing but heavy breathing. There might be a body weight day where you're not picking up a weight. But you're going to have very little rest. You're never going to do really, really high reps, but you're going to do a lot of volume. I find that works for me. At 51 years old, my body is not broke down. I mean, just 4 months ago, I did 1,001 consecutive burpee pull-ups at 50 years old for the second time in my life. And that type of repetitive movement is a lot of, we'll do a lot of things like that, scaled to different levels, though, of course. Okay, never for that type of volume, but I like the idea. My whole philosophy is to be able to be just as effective with a minimal rest, a minute later, 30 seconds later, whatever it is, and go at it just as hard as you did or better. And having a endurance base that can kind of carry you through one of our workouts is really important. Um, you're going to work for pretty much 40 straight minutes most days here. Where if you go to a CrossFit workout, they might have a day where it's a 12-minute WOD or whatever, and then they're doing some supplemental stuff. But you're going to get a lot of volume in here.
And where did your philosophy of training come from?
You know what? It's funny because I've thought a lot about this. I think a lot of it is intuitive with a lot of people, not just myself. Years ago, I started doing a 2-3-5 format before I even knew who Dan John was. You know what I mean? like seriously, it was like I'm like, when I read his book, I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing this.
Former guest on this podcast,
and a legend. But I do think that there's stuff that like not everything is original, and I think if you listen to what you like, in my early days, I just kind of did what felt good. And I still rely on that a lot now. I do what I need to do, but a lot of times I'm doing what I feel like my body's responding well to. And I'll be honest with you, my body doesn't respond well to more than 5 repetitions of almost anything. It never has. And I found that like over time, when I'm doing these endurance-based type workouts, or I'm doing, if I'm working a volume type workout, I want to keep the reps low. And maybe I'm alternating with something complementary, or maybe I'm not. Maybe I keep going back to it. Kind of like, when I'm talking about the burpee pull-ups, I just keep going back to it. But like, I really try to be intuitive and see how I feel when I'm putting things together. And I do believe that there needs to be like at least one day a week where you walk into the gym without any plan. You say, okay, let's try figuring some stuff out. Okay. And all of that winds up translating to my large group training, all of it.
But where does your personal motivation come from? I want to be fit and healthy, and I go to a CrossFit gym a bit less than I should, but a hideous workout like 1,001 burpee pull-ups. What's your motivation?
Well, the first time I did it, again, it started with, on Saturdays, I used to spend Saturday right after I taught our 8 o'clock class. And that was my kind of screw around time. And I put the clock on to go off every minute, and I started putting some things together. I'm like, okay, I'm going to work on some top of the minute formats, which I love just because I like the way it just keeps everything moving. And I put together some complementary things. And at the time, one of my long-time workouts was 5 burpee pull-ups the first minute, 5 kettlebell clean and press the second minute, alternating between those two. And, maybe it started as a 12-minute workout, then it kind of extended out from there. Well, I was doing that, and I said, okay, let me just keep going back to the burpee pull-ups. Now, I did the burpee pull-up workout for 20 minutes, which is 100 burpee pull-ups, and I got done, and I was like, holy crap, that was incredible. And I just had this rush, this high from it. And it was one of those things. I'm starting to talk to people about it in the gym. We're trying, oh my God, you're doing this. And again, this is a long time ago. A lot of people never even saw a burpee pull-up before. And so we're talking about it in a cool down one day. And now at this point here, I'd stretched it out to an hour. And now it's still a regular, almost like fitness test that I do monthly. I do 5 burpee pull-ups at the top of every minute for 60 minutes. And it kind of gives me some feedback on where my fitness level's at. And so it's 300 within the hour. And we were talking about it, and somebody in the cool down one day said, you should turn this into like a fundraiser. What if you did like 500? What if you did that? And I'm like, well, maybe, so we kind of talked about it. So I said, let me do some trial runs. And, a week later, I stretched it out to 500. And a couple weeks later, I stretched it out to 750. And I was like, yeah, I feel okay, And so I was like, all right, let's do this. So it actually turned into a fundraiser. And the people in the gym got behind it. The people in the community got behind it. We even had, like, when I did it, there was even a local news crew that came in to kind of record it. I have no idea. I didn't tell them. I had no idea how they found out about it, but they did. And so I did 1,000 burpee pull-ups. We raised a little over $10,000. And what we wound up doing the idea was to outfit the elementary and middle schools in town with functional training equipment. In New Hampshire here, the schools are severely underfunded. So whatever equipment they had and we're talking ancient. So for a business like us to be able that does what we do for a living and promotes this type of lifestyle, it was kind of a no-brainer. So that time when I did it, I had the pressure where all of a sudden it turned into this thing where I'm like, oh my God, I got all these people counting on me. um, I have to like, I have to be able to do this. So that's what kind of drove it the first time, honestly. And it broke me. I mean, like it was like I was in a car crash when I finished. I was devastated. I couldn't even undress myself. I was standing there like seriously, I couldn't bend it was like my abdomen was seizing up. It was like my muscles wanted to work their way outside of my body. My wife had to undress me, dress me. Somebody had to put me in a car and drive me home. And I didn't like at the time, I'm like, I did it, but God, I can't believe how tragic that was. And I recovered, and it always stuck in the back of my mind where I was like, I wonder if I could do it better. And I kind of put it out there. Again, 5 years later, I turned 50, and I kind of put it out there. I said, hey, I think I want to do this again. I want to try it. And after swearing I never would try it, I just want to see if I could do it better. So this past winter, I really kind of focused on, preparing myself for it, to the point where I was doing 500 every other day. Now it just became like, this was a mission. This was something that I had to challenge myself on. And over the years, I've done different things to challenge myself. And I didn't want it to become like a spectacle this time. So when I was ready, it was actually after a Saturday class. Everyone left, and I told my son, I said, hey, look, I might just go for it today. I'll text you when I'm like, at 500, if I'm going to keep going, come on in just in case I run into trouble. So I hit 500. It was like a Saturday. My wife and my son didn't even know that I was doing it. I texted them. I said, hey, why don't you and Nancy come in, and just in case. So they came in and like were my support crew for like the last 500. And I don't know how, but it was a completely different experience. I finished I did 1,001. I immediately broke into tears, and I couldn't believe that it was so different being 5 years older, but working like I do for those 5 years, I've built up even more of a base. You don't say you get better when you get older, but in this case I did. I got better as I aged because I've done the work consistently, day after day, month after month, year after year.
And is there an end goal?
You know what? I had that moment. I didn't need to share. I didn't need to have like a camera in front of me. I didn't need to have the news crew there. I just wanted to be able to do it better than I did it the first time. And that's all I wanted to get out of it. And that was strictly for me. And, if it inspires some of the people here in my gym to be able to kind of maybe expect a little bit more of themselves, if they see somebody like me, do something like that, then that's great. That's what I try to do here. I try to be like an example. Now, I don't want anybody doing that. Okay, that's ridiculous. And I understand that, unless they want to, but it's not for, somebody who's leaving here and going to sit behind a desk all day long. Okay. It's not necessarily, smart. And I will say this, I will never do it again.
Are you not worried it's looming when you get to 55? You'll think, well, put my theory to the test.
Not that, but I'll always kind of look for something else. 3 years ago, I did this thing called Ski Erg September, where I had this idea. I called up Greg from Concept 2 and I said, hey, has anybody done this before? Well, I'm thinking about starting at 1,000 meters on September 1st, and every day for 30 days adding another 1,000 meters on the ski erg. And, I talked to a friend of mine in Australia, Chris Feather, about it too. And he was like, I wanted to actually try to get him to do it at the same time with me. I thought it'd be kind of cool if he was doing it in Australia and I was doing it here. But he had some back stuff going on. He was worried about that. So I started it, and first of all, Greg at Concept 2 said, yeah, no, I've never heard of it. And I asked him, do you think I can do it? And he goes, I have no idea. And I just didn't. I entered it thinking, could I can you do something like that? Can you repetitively go back to back to back to back like that and increase the volume? So I did. I started it, and I started on September 1st, like 3 years ago, at 1,000 meters, and every day that month until I got to the 30th day. So it was like, it was, for the 28th of the month, it was 28,000 meters. For the 29th of the month, it was 29,000 meters. And when I got to the 30th, I had it in my head that, okay, if I make it this and I feel good, instead of finishing with a 30,000 meter skier, I'm going to finish with a full marathon. So the 42,195, whatever it is, that's what I wound up finishing within the last day. And surprisingly, what wound up happening was I got really good at the ski erg. I didn't break down, and everything else went to crap in my training, but I got really good at the ski erg. It was one of these mental challenges that occasionally I need, and that one held my attention for a 30-day period, which was pretty unique.
The mental journey is more interesting, Hayden, than the physical one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's, I was at one point a Jim Jones certified trainer, and that was one of the things that drew me to them, because again, early days of the internet, I'm like, oh my God, there's these wackos that are kind of just as crazy as me, and that's what kind of drew me to it, and they were doing things that I was doing again intuitively. It's like I don't believe anything's original. I think whatever you're doing, somebody else in the world is doing it too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
there's people can think they're reinventing the wheel, but we're not. We're just kind of doing what we feel like we should. And I think that's really important. I think it's really important to experiment and try different things, and not get so fixated on doing what everyone else is doing. I think you need to create something of your own, and then, but I mean, honestly, I think somebody out there is probably doing it as well.
I got to ask you about Jim Jones, because I guess people that may not be familiar with it, in the mid 2000s, it kind of came to prominence, and lasted maybe 10 years, as one of the most kind of mythical gyms out there. And it seems like you went in with both feet on Jim Jones.
Yeah, I did, and it was a learning experience. I don't regret it. I think that they clearly, when you have different personalities, you have different interests, and those change. And I think that sometimes when growth happens, people have their own interests, and if they're not the same, if everybody's not on this, hey, I know this. If my wife, my son, and I are not on the same page, we're not here.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's no different than any other dynamic. And, theirs was a family business, if you want to call it that, as well. And to a sense, in a sense, and, when you have different opinions and different visions, then, there's going to be issues.
What was it like training there back in?
It was great.
In the heyday of Jim Jones.
It was great. Yeah. You know what? I think it was, they were at the time very innovative and did some cool things. And again, it was a focus on, if you were someone who was beyond aesthetics.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're somebody that wanted to dig deeper, it was the place you wanted to be, and you'd go in there and you'd be blown up. And that's not for everybody. But when you get a bunch of people that are looking to be blown up, okay, in the same room, then magic can happen, which is pretty cool. And that's what it was like back then.
Was the training as hard as everyone says? Because you hear these stories about it, and it's one of the, I think the Jim Jones, perhaps as it used to be, I don't know what it's like now, but it's mythical.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, I think that there's still, that aspect, and I think they're trying to do, some good things, and I wish them well. I hope they can. And I think that, in order to do that, they got to make sure that they continue to innovate. You can't rely on what was done. You can't just look at say, hey, we did 300 FY, 10 years ago. Let's, and again, it can be still part of your package, but you got to add things to it, and you got to create a new dynamic. And I think they're trying to, for sure. But I think like anything, there'll be certain things, including my gym here, Max Edge, which will have a shelf life. You know what I mean? CrossFit will have a shelf life. Everything is going to have a shelf life. And depending on what you do and the actions you take or don't take will determine just how long your shelf life is. But none of us will be around here forever.
But how do you keep it fresh in the gym? How do you make that shelf life as long as possible?
I think I continue to try to like innovate and keep things interesting. You can't keep going back to the well and doing the same thing. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm inventing new exercises. It means that I'm creating new, different dynamics within the workout. I think that naturally, by creating team type training here, where what I mean by that is like, hey, you're working together with these two, three, or four or five other people to accomplish a common goal, or you're working off of a partner, doing a lot of that keeps it interesting to say the least. Where if it winds up being, in my opinion, is this, and this is just my opinion, if it's all about me having the fastest time or the best score and having my name first on the board, sorry, but that doesn't move my needle one iota. Okay, it just doesn't. And I think that that whole individualism, all right, can actually tear a gym apart. I think when you have people that are more focused on getting their name up on a board, okay, rather than doing quality reps, you're going to create division within the gym. People will know, hey, I know that guy's full of shit. He did not do those reps. Okay, I've heard it in the past when we first started here. That's why I stopped doing most of those types of workouts. I would hear people say, yeah, did you look at the reps? Blah, 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 blah. There's all this like back talk. I'm like, I don't want any part of that. I don't want any part of that. I just want to focus on getting people better. And what I found was by creating these group type dynamics, my God, if you're responsible for somebody else, okay, that's really what it's about. If we're doing a workout, you and I, okay, and you need to hold this weight up over your head until I wind up rowing X amount of meters or running X far or doing this or doing that, well, I sure as hell better care about you, okay, because I'm looking over at you while you're struggling, okay, when you're depending on me, there is a sense of urgency that honestly, if you have a soul, okay, if you have any soul at all and you care about your fellow human being, that will motivate you more than anything else. That will motivate me more than having my name on the board first. That's just me, though.
Do you think the people you've got now? You said, I was interested when you said that everything's got a shelf life. Do you think people who are coming now will drift away unless you can constantly keep finding a reason for them to keep coming back?
Oh, of course. I think that's all. You're always going to have some attrition. You know, you'll always have people that'll be like, okay, hey, look, I'm on to the next thing. Just because this is who I am doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be who they are forever. And there'll be certain people where they will. I mean, we have people here that have been here since the first month, a lot of people, and they've never gone anywhere else. And we've had other people that have lasted a couple of years and they're like, hey, okay, well, I've had enough. I don't want to work this hard anymore. You know what I mean? There's some of that. There's absolutely some of that. And that's okay. You know, and it's not for everybody. That's why we don't have any type of long-term commitment here. Everybody's month to month, always has been. We just want people to be here that want to be here. Now, that being said, you know, we've been fortunate and we have a good base of really, really committed people that will just seem to keep attracting other committed people. And we've also developed enough of a reputation where, you know, people that are looking for something like this, you know, this is where they want to go.
And for you, what do you think the future of the gym looks like? Do you kind of think long term, or do you just think about the next year?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I have to think long term. I'm 51, and I've always known, and I actually had this talk with Mark Twight a couple of years ago about, you know, what do I do when I can't do this stuff anymore or be as effective physically, you know? And, you know, he reminded me, it's not about like what you can do. It's really about like what you know, what you can convey to people. And it's true, you know, I see myself, honestly, I don't see myself ever retiring. I don't think I could ever do that. But I do see maybe my role changing. when I'm later, I'd like to share more of my knowledge. I'd like to share like what we do. Last year I had I put it out on Instagram. I said, hey, if anybody wants to come learn what we do here in large group training, spend a weekend here, it's free. Just show up. And we had about 10 people show up from all over the country. And I had a number of requests from people in the UK and beyond. And of course that gets pretty expensive, but we didn't charge anybody anything. We had them come in, spend the weekend. We talked about training, and that's something I'd like to continue to do and do regularly. We talked about training. We talked about almost everything, community building. And people brought their own stories to the table, which was great. And it wound up becoming a real sharing weekend where things got pretty personal, and a lot of people of how they got to where they are and where they want to be and all that. It was fantastic. And so, part of me would like to be able to do more of that, in my later years. I don't see Max Edge ever going anywhere, hopefully not. I hope that we can continue to do this type of training. Will it evolve? I don't know, but I don't have any real, plans on ever doing anything other than this. But certainly, if there's, if the model needs to change because, I don't know, because we change our mentality a little bit, I don't know, maybe we would, but for now, I'd like to add more than really take away.
Well, I mean, given where the gym started and where you started out, I don't think anyone's going to bet against you still being there in 10, 20 years' time.
I hope so. 20 might be pushing it, but I hope not.
Yeah, maybe 20's pushing it.
Maybe I'd like to have a nice little small studio then where we're doing some small group or one-on-one training, that type thing, But I would like to, part of me would like to be able to use what I've learned and share it with others, and maybe, go to these places that I haven't had time to go to. I'd love to go over to the UK and maybe have a seminar someday, or I'd love to go to Australia, different places where maybe we could talk about what we do here. And that would be something that would really intrigue me.
All right. Well, if people want to get in touch and invite you over for an all expenses trip to to Melbourne or to London, how can they do that?
Well, they can go to our website, maxedgefitness.com. And my email address is j@maxedgefitness.com. So go ahead, send the invitation and a plane ticket, and I'll be there.
Jay, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Charlie, thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks to Jay for the call, and don't forget to check out maxedgefitness.com. That's it from us this time. We've got a huge amount of guests lined up and much more to come in the coming weeks and months. If you're enjoying the shows we've done so far, why not do us a favour and leave us an iTunes review? It really does help us out and allow us to keep making these podcasts. Thank you for listening. Speak to you soon.